Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Martijn. I'm one of the co-founders of HighExistence, and I'd love to share a little bit about procrastination today. This was my very last article I ever wrote for HighExistence, and it was in a time when I was actually really struggling with this. And so, yeah, let's get into it. I'm very open to questions today, so if you have anything, I think in the chat, just let me know, and we can dive in. There we go. So procrastination is, I think, a very common activity behavior that people indulge in. And I think it's one of the bigger limitations to any form of self-mastery, because yeah, we'll get into that. So quick background on what is procrastination now exactly. If you go to the etymology, it was basically the study of words and how their meaning changed over time. If you go back to Latin, it means to put off until tomorrow. But if you go back to Greek, it stems from the word akrasia, which means doing something against our better judgment. And so the modern definition of procrastination is to put off intentionally the doing of something that should be done. And so to come back, it's against our better judgment. So we know we do it, we know where it leads, and yet somehow we do it anyways. And so this is one of the interesting things about procrastination, because it's done with agency, and we don't really want to do it. We know it's harmful, yet we do it anyways. And so it's often seen as a form of self-sabotage. And I found this meme at the HighExistence Instagram, and I really love this one. So the frog says to the turtle, "There's so many things I want to do before I die." And the turtle replies, "Then do them." And then the frog says, "Oh, naive little turtle, that would require actually doing them." And so the frog here says there are so many things I want to do. And then the last panel says that would require to actually do them, and he doesn't want to do them. And so we're in this split. We both want to do them and we don't want to do them. So how do we resolve that? And let's get into that here. Quick disclaimer before I go into the deeper psychological patterns of procrastination is that everyone faces procrastination, and it's inherent to just being human. It's not very unique. Everybody does it to a certain extent. The best way I think to think about it is it's more like an impersonal, just a psychological feedback loop that has gotten haywire. It is not a personal shortcoming. It is not like a moral failure. It is not that you're weak. It's not that you just can't control yourself. It is a very specific thing that I think once you understand it, you can actually implement some techniques and just get rid of it. And so it is well understood, and there are very active methods to resolving this. To add to that, this presentation merely represents my existential view on procrastination, which are based on kind of two seemingly conflicting human drives. One is the classic to preserve energy, reduce risk, and just feel good. The other one is to always grow towards our potential, to thrive, grow, and evolve. And so these are the techniques that within this framework that have, for me, my procrastination in the past was pretty bad at times. it's hard to imagine what I was like. So after writing the article for HighExistence, I basically never went back. I implemented these things, and for this presentation, I actually had to go back to my article and really dig into what I did to overcome it, because it's just so far removed from me anymore. So if I could do it, I know you can do it, and you can take some of the first steps as well. Obviously, results may vary, and in general, I believe that all knowledge is worthless without any commitment to change, commitment to actually implementing it. And so you need to have that internal willingness to say to yourself, like, yes, I want to do this. So which brings me to the next slide. If you're ready to change and you're struggling with procrastination, please type yes in the chat. I don't know if there's a delay in this, but there's a delay. Great. All right, there's some yeses here. Awesome. And some names I recognize, so that's really cool. Awesome. Very happy to have such a great amount of people here. So it's not completely fair, because saying yes to this actually means it's going to be difficult at times to confront some of the things that are hard to confront. And I'll go a bit deeper into that right here. So let's go back to the definition. To put off intentionally the doing of something that should be done. And so my view on this, there is a difference right now where you are between your actual situation and your highest potential. And so I assume that if you're on this presentation and you're doing this stay-at-home retreats, which I really love, taking this time to connect with yourself and use this time for good, use this time to grow. I think it's great. But it also means that every moment you are distracted or willfully avoiding going towards your potential, you are procrastinating. And that's a form of procrastination. And this I find a very helpful framework for myself, where I am where I am right now, but there's also a huge potential of who I could be or could become. And to see procrastination in this new context means the actuality of not doing what should be done to reach your potential. And self-mastery to me is all about closing this gap. So actually, procrastination is a very, very simple thing that happens. And it's basically part of our brain that's stuck in a positive reinforcement loop. And the best way, I think, to think about procrastination is that it's merely the avoidance of feelings we relate to the task. It's not the task itself. It's not the fact that we have to give a public talk, or that there's this thing inherently to calling your mother that's impossible to do. No, it's these range of feelings, and they're different for every single person, that for some reason we don't want to feel. And often these are boredom, anxiety, insecurity, frustration, resentment, self-doubt, you name it. These are things that are almost inherently uncomfortable and makes our body feel like we're not safe, something is wrong, this is not supposed to be happening, and we try to find a way to get rid of this feeling. And the trick with procrastination is that the moment we put off a task, it creates a momentary relief. and we create this pattern. Oh, there's a task. We know we want to do it. We intend to do this, and let's say it's a paper you want to write, or it's meditation, or you want to learn an instrument. And often this task means you will be confronted with your own, especially in the beginning, with your own inadequacy, and that doesn't feel great. That feels that we're maybe not the person we think we were. That we might be judged. All these things, and so once we think about it, once we move towards that task, that feeling gets bigger and bigger. And if you've learned how to manage that by avoiding it, basically meaning to give in to feel good, we've created a little habit that over time can become a really bad habit, that we want to avoid those feelings by actually not doing the task. And then we're basically in this split of part of us really intends to become the person who did it, and the other part is really self-sabotaging us and constantly avoiding the task of actually doing it. If there are any questions at this time, I think this will be a good time to address some of them. If not, I'll just continue. And I know there's a delay, so I'll wait a few seconds. Nothing comes up yet. There we go. So let me see. So lots of questions. Do you think fear of failure is the biggest issue? I think that's a pretty big one, because I think the fear of failure is often tied to it's often very deeply existential. Like, failing could mean in the past that you could reject a better group, we would miss a mate, we would actually die, and so it can be very destabilizing or paralyzing, and it's a big one. Yeah, how to notice these feelings? Often these feelings arise in the body, and practices like therapy, like meditation, often if they have a physical body element to it, are great to get more awareness around that. That awareness is very, very important to overcome procrastination, and also to communicate and just operate in the world. So very important. How can we get used to doing things that make us feel uncomfortable? I'm going deeper into that later. But basically, it's exposure therapy. And there are some techniques for us to actually go into that and reframe that, because these negative feelings are actually a great opportunity. But I will go into that. James, good to see you again. Yeah, punishing yourself for procrastination is a very, very common habit. It actually makes procrastination worse, and we're getting back into that as well later. Example of a way I procrastinated in the past. Yeah, I took about a year to write my philosophy thesis, and I found everything more interesting than my philosophy thesis. And yeah, there was definitely a lot of fear of being judged. My professor was quite not very easy to work with, and I put so much pressure on myself. That it was such a huge task that even starting it just filled me with dread and fear, and I just undermining myself, like, and I couldn't recognize myself almost. Like, that was definitely the worst I was, and that was one of the big reasons why I wanted to figure this out, because it was like I knew I had this potential. I knew I could, like I had the wits, I had the resilience on some level. Yet this thing was holding me back, and I was like, how the hell did it? I just couldn't understand it. Um, so I'm gonna go back to the presentation, and if there are any specific questions that are worth answering, I don't know if Mike is here or Eric that can help me with that. So just to reiterate, is the avoidance of feelings we relate to the task, and then we put up the task, and it's basically a form of feeling, giving to feel good. It's basically this. This is my very high standard drawing skills. We have a negative feeling, we momentarily avoid it, and we feel better, which is great. The issue with it is, though, that the primacy of short-term mood repair, it really prevents other things like the longer-term pursuit of intended actions, and so it's a failure of emotional self-regulation. And why is it a failure? Well, as you all know, and anyone who has procrastinated ever, the task and negative feelings don't merely remain, they actually increase through procrastination cognitions. So we have the task, we have the negative feeling, but on top of that, we build stress and anxiety. Like we are getting very close to deadlines. We blame ourselves. We feel guilty of not doing things, not following up on our commitments. And we get an image, like we get low self-esteem, like we feel like a failure, and all these things are like, oh, this task was not worth it, this task is better to be avoided, because it drives all these other feelings, and that really mounts, and then we give in to feel good again, which reinforces this loop. And I've seen this with some of my coaching clients. It leads up to giving up, quitting, and even stronger version of escapism, like not fulfilling your responsibilities in life, not doing the things that are demanded of you, whether they're right or not wrong. Often these lead to addictions, then to denials, and even to delusions. Like you have to the feelings are so uncomfortable. You're creating a reality. You're going to filter out everything of that reality to not feel those things, and it's more common than you think. Uh, Especially if you take a very esoteric Buddhist or psychonautic perspective on things, then um, you can almost all of that tie back to procrastination of not wanting to feel and putting off to seeing things how they really are. But that's for another talk. That's going to be a bit more, yeah, philosophical than this presentation. And so there's a little comment here as well. Like, while it appears that procrastination leads to fun enjoyment, this is often just a short-term facade. The fun that we're having with procrastination is actually not really fun. If you check in deeper with, for example, with meditation and you procrastinate, and there's this ongoing anxiety in the body, and it's just being masked. And it's actually the chronic use of that is one of the worst things that you can do to take yourself down. It's really painful, or it's really how do you say that? It's really harmful. It's very detrimental to your self-growth, to your self-image, all these things. So this is the loop. I call it the cycle of pain and despair. Negative feeling, you avoid it, you're happy for a while, but the negative feeling comes back, it actually builds up, you avoid it again, etc., etc. So I'd like to take this moment to ask everyone in the chat, like, what is a task you have been avoiding? And just close your eyes and just be really honest with yourself. What is something that you know if you would do, you would reach your potential one step closer, you would feel happy about yourself. But for some reason you've intended this, but you haven't done it yet. Quitting job, repairing a friendship, going back to university, exercise, cleaning your room, yeah, calling friends, eating video editing, exercise, decluttering. Yeah, decluttering is huge. Man, if you just start doing that, it's huge. Cutting out bad habits. Devin Flab, I need to live alone. That's a big one. Taxes, they're horrible. Boredom for sure. Journaling, writing. Yeah, these are very common ones. Like everybody has these things, and it's God. Can you imagine yourself just being able to do these things? Like the frustration of not doing them, and then looking back and actually have done them. That's amazing. So meditation, marketing, painting. Yeah. Thanks for sharing, guys. And keep these in mind because we're going to get back to these later. So how to overcome it. And the only way that you can do this is to replace the positive reinforcement loop by a new and better loop. Like judging yourself, blaming yourself, fear, guilt, yourself into this never work. And like some people want to do new systems, set deadlines, and sometimes this works a little bit, but it doesn't really overcome the underlying issue. And there's actually this thing. This is like one of the. If you start meditating on procrastination, you can sometimes feel all these stories around it, and a very common one is actually to wait until like deadline, and once you do a task and you only done the bare minimum to complete a task, then after the task you can always say, if you failed, well, I only started the last day, so it wasn't really you failing. And if you made it, you actually argue yourself like, oh, look at how great I am. I did this at the last day. And so both of them create these another feedback loops that are very detrimental, but are very hard to pierce through because both are like seemingly win-win situations. So the best way to do this is finding a better reward. And so in the end, this can only be the gratification of finishing our intended task and the growth that comes from challenging ourselves. And of course, how do we do this? And so on the left hand, there are a bunch of losing strategies. One of obviously is continued procrastination, judging yourself because it creates more negative emotions. The belief that negative voices are to be avoided, and this is a really big one. And I want to take a pause on this because we live in a society from a very young age. We kind of are taught like a very hedonistic sense of the world, that more happiness means more activities that makes us feel good, and we have to avoid negative feelings at all costs, which couldn't be further from the truth. And we're going to go back into that a little bit more. What also never works is waiting for the right time or the right feeling. Like you make yourself dependent on conditions to actually start a task that on some level, those conditions will never come. So you can never do the task. Another thing that often very common is thinking what you guys just put in the chat is actually not important. We often use thinking symbols to increase value and decrease value of things that are in our world. And it's often where we look back at something that we procrastinated on and then think, oh, that was actually not important. And that also creates additional layers of that feedback loop that in the future you also think these tasks are not important as a way to cope with emotions again, which of course leads to not doing it, which leads to lower self-image, etc. Winning strategies, and we're going to go back into those after this, is self-forgiveness, the self-awareness, specifically around suffering that can be avoided. Simply said, there is no way out of negative emotions. Negative emotions are amazing that we have them. There's a story of a guy who he had something in his brain that he couldn't feel fear anymore. And fear, there's this quote called the positive intention of fear is risk management. So this guy forgot to check the street before he crossed, and he got in a car accident and didn't survive, because these negative emotions are telling us something. Often with the task, they're telling us something wrong, and we need to reprogram ourselves with the new feedback loop. But they are very important, and so the understanding that they can't be avoided. Okay, great. That's there's no way out. What am I going to do with the time? And often these negative emotions actually signal that a task is meaningful to us. And so there's something at stake. And often procrastination feels good because there's nothing at stake. But these are like empty calories. They're not really something we work for. And so on some level, we know we don't really deserve these things. And a way out through all these things is intention setting a standards for ourselves, actually aiming for joy. Because if this is not going to be joyful, it's not going to work. And so we have to get out of the cycle of momentary pleasure, judging, and then negative emotions, momentary pleasure. There is a way out, and it comes through aiming for joy. Also cultivate a form of curiosity, and of course, in the end, step 2, overcome procrastination, always leads to getting started. You have to get started. If not, it will never happen. Quick note on that: the moment you start doing things, most of these emotions actually fall away. They're often the perception of us being in front of the task to the perception of us looking back at the task are very, very different. And so we actually fool ourselves a lot by thinking or feeling wrong emotions around tasks. And so we need to reprogram ourselves. If there's anything in the chat, I'm going to have a quick look right now. Yeah, great chat and great discussion already. So let me just continue. There's nothing urgent, I think. So I really like this quote because this is one of the most common misconceptions, I think, around procrastination, which is that our motivational state must match task at hand. And I believe this. Like, I need to have my coffee, I need to feel creative, I need to feel in the flow to be able to do all these things, not realizing that the flow actually comes after having started, after I've been through this challenging period where I didn't know what to do next, after I figured out like some of the first steps that were really uncomfortable. And so what he says is that attitudes follow behaviors more, or at least as much as behaviors follow attitudes. And so when you start to act on your intention as intended, you will see your attitude and motivation change. And this book, actually, Solving the Procrastination Puzzle, was one of the, I think, monumental books that really helped me to become aware of this pattern. And awareness wasn't one of the first really big steps. So how to implement these things? So remember the task you wrote in the chat. I'd like you to now write the emotion in the chat that you feel in your body when you imagine yourself approaching and engaging with it. And so you have to focus on anything that can be seen as negative, can be seen as resistance and aversion. So I'd like for you to take a moment and close your eyes. Take a deep breath and remind yourself of the task that you wrote in the chat. Is there a feeling in the body that arises with this task? Is there anxiety? Is there fear? Is there fear of failure? Is there a sense of judgment? Whatever comes up, that's the thing that's with this specific task is holding you back. And if you want, please share them in the chat, because I think it's really helpful for everyone else to understand that this is a very common feeling. Like, these are not unique things that are not you're not able to overcome. It's boredom, fear of judgment, fear of effort, fear of failure, attacked and judged, anxiety. Yeah, anxiety. Yeah, these were all the same for me. Steve, sir, you said it was impossible. I would suggest for you to, yeah, there was, I think, a talk yesterday about the biomotive framework, about feeling your emotions. I think it's really important if you want to overcome this, to start matching your emotions with the tasks. Without that, you will be basically, driving blind. Fear of success, that's a big one too. Not easy to admit to yourself, though. And so know that the only way to overcome this feeling is actually to do the task. Like, the feeling won't go away by procrastination. It will stay there. It will actually get worse. Now, close your eyes again and imagine a task. Imagine you doing it. Really embody the feeling of failure, of success, anxiety. And now set the intention that when you feel this, you are going the right direction. This is meaningful for you. This is something you care about. Your body knows this is not something that you don't care about. This is something that could change your life if you start doing it. And so how would you check in with yourself, and how would you feel if you did this? Would you feel a sense of relief, of gratitude, of accomplishment? Would you feel you want to do something more? is a step towards the next step to something greater. So imagine you doing this without a care and creating something amazing. How would you feel? Oh yeah, imposter syndrome, Molly. That's a really, uh, it's a really big one in procrastination, because it's like the thing with the self-image. If you couldn't trust yourself in the past, then let's say there's a new opportunity coming up. You know, on some level, you can't really commit to it because you haven't in the past, and so you feel like an imposter. That's uh, these chronic things really hold ourselves back, and like yeah, like it happened to me, and I like I'm not stupid. I'm not afraid. I'm not like I know what motivation is and discipline, but this was still holding me back. And once I fixed this, I founded apotheosis retreats, and I founded synthesis retreats, and I got in this new feedback loop where procrastination just wasn't an issue anymore. So yeah, so these positive emotions, they're they're the new feedback loop, um, and we want to rewire ourselves of learning these negative emotions are actually, oh wow, that's the direction I need to go, and you're getting these new emotions that um, um, yeah, that will rewire your brain into procrastinate not being a problem anymore. So there's a question from Holly. What if there is a very possible bad outcome for the task? Um, well, that's a more of an existential question. Is this task still worth doing? And that's like a question before. So procrastination is often with, okay, we actually want to do this, we intend to do this, and we can't for some reason get to starting it. But a question whether we even should be intending this, um, that's yeah, there's a risk assessment there. Like, is it worth it? Is the outcome a good potential outcome? Is that better than avoiding it? Because some tasks are better left alone. There's things not worth doing. Um, but we have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to learn how to do simple tasks that even feel awful, feel with some fear, with some anxiety, um, before we can learn like what is this really checking with ourselves. Am I avoiding this, or is this actually just not wise to do? Um, so I only have like 15 minutes left, so I'm gonna want to make sure I go through the whole thing. But it's important we use the stick and the carrot. So the stick is if we don't do it, this feeling will stick, and the carrot is we'll get an amazing self-image. We learn how to regulate our emotions, and we get to do the things we intended to do. Which every time we complete something, our being grows and we can do new things. We see new opportunities. And that's been very true for me and my coaching clients. Um, like once you said yes to this, you know you can do it. What else can you say yes to? And that's the new feedback loop that I want to get you into. So this is what I started doing. I started to make a huge list of all the things that I wanted to do. And I started writing down all the emotions I was avoiding. And then next to it, I started to write down all the emotions that I knew I would feel if I would complete these things. Um, and that's what I recommend as well, to start to get some lay of the land um, of our avoidance patterns. Um, then next step is to forgive yourself. Um, any judgment will only make it harder to overcome this. And so I want to repeat again, you're not stupid, you're not a failure, you're not a unique person that can never overcome these things. It's just a feedback loop. It's almost an impersonal system going haywire. Forgive yourself makes it a lot easier to start next time. Create a self-awareness. Like these emotions, we don't like to feel them, so most people don't even know how they arise and when they arise. What like the thought patterns around it. So if one of your intentions is to start a meditation practice, I would say do it, and treat this overcoming of procrastination like a meditation practice. It basically means you set down 30 minutes a day. You pick up your list and you say, okay, for 30 minutes, I'm gonna do tasks that make me feel like shit. And every time you get distracted, you bring your awareness back to the feeling first and then the task. And over time, you create the resilience, you create the exposure. And what I would suggest, or what I often would find, is that after those 30 minutes, you want to keep going. Because once you're in the task, the emotions feel different, your self-image changed, and now it's like, oh, great! There's actually congruence between you intending it and the emotions you're feeling, and that's an exhilarating experience, especially if it's been something that you've been putting off for a very long time. This one is huge. So this is an implementation intention, which basically teaches your body to act in the way you want it to act in the future. It's basically, you decide beforehand how to act. Which is always in if-then statements. You're basically future projecting yourself and making it easier for next time you're in that situation to pick the decision that you intend to do. So this is one I wrote for myself as like a framework. Next time if I feel the emotion, let's say anxiety, associated with, I don't know, calling my friends, I don't want to avoid it any longer. And I would use the anxiety as a cue to get started immediately. And this is actually what I started training myself. It's like, oh, I feel anxiety because I don't want to do this. I'm going to do this. And it's so powerful if you see yourself being able to do these things. It's because you learn how to do anything almost. And that's going back to the potential slide, actuality versus potential. Like we are all full of this tremendous potential. We see things in humans that we're like, wow, you guys can able to do that. And so you're a human, you're probably likely to get very close or even better than some of these individuals. But you have to practice every day and you have to really commit to it. And by taking the first step, that's how the new feedback loop is created. Another one I started doing is, next time I see myself going for an activity to distract myself, I check in with myself to see if there's anything else I should be doing. And almost always there is, because my potential is infinite. And my actuality, I'm very small. There's so much more to do. So there's always something that I know I can apply or do. And at the end of the day, I want to feel great. I want to look back and see, wow, you really pushed it this time. You really stepped up. And so this is one I use still to this day, because if there is something, I just stop what I'm doing, stop doing distraction. I feel the emotion and start doing the task instead. And so this is a classic wise man. Do or do not. There is no try. There's the only one way, and that's, on some level, you have to commit to doing it. I'm going to check if there's any questions or comments right now. Yeah, it's like making your anxiety your messenger friend. Yeah, that's it. Like I started becoming like grateful, like, oh wow, that's fair. Oh wow, you really feel like this is really important to me. I should put some extra time in this. Cindy asks, how do you deal with intentional action burnout? I'm not sure I follow that. Intentional action burnout. Often burnout, in my understanding, is doing a lot of things that are not inherently meaningful. Um, and they're all kinds of shoulds that you should be doing and you don't really want to do them. So if that's what you mean, then it's getting out of the situation where you are right now. If it's something else, then one of the intentions you should be doing, one of the tasks is recovering, which is, it shouldn't always be young practices. Yin is also very, very important. Matt asked me if you go back to the if-then slide, and of course I'm happy to do that. There you go. They're called implementation intentions, and they're worth Googling, worth making a screenshot here. So, all right. Next step, the way I started to think about this was to create some standards and just a sense of what I found acceptable and not. And this actually helped me to gear my emotions towards an outcome that I would prefer. And I'll explain in a minute. So I made a list of things I do accept of myself. And they might be like little rewards, or when I'm tired, it's okay to sleep in. But what I don't accept is having made a promise to someone, committing to something, and then not following up on it. And so, even if I'm tired, and so there are emotions that want to guide us in the right direction, but there are also sometimes emotions that whatever, like no matter what I feel, this is what I committed to. And so these are the ones that I put down for myself. I think it's about 3 years ago. No matter what storm I'm weathering, I'm staying on purpose. So I was feeling a lot of difficult emotions, but I had a plan to create a retreat, which became Apotheosis. And I felt inadequate. I felt fearful. I didn't know who was I to create something like that. And it was deep. It was a deep process. But I knew it was so important for me to start something that I knew would give so much transformation and meaning to people that I had to do it. And I'd use that one again and again, like 100 times a day. Second one, how I feel is secondary, what I accomplish primary. This goes back into the statement that feelings follow behaviors, not the other way around. Like, focus on accomplishing first, and the great feelings will come, guaranteed. This was a smaller one. I always broke down things in steps, and if I knew I had to accomplish a really big one, I go into my calendar and say, okay, I need at least 2 hours a day for the next 5 days to do this, and I would block those 2 hours, and I would sit with it, and I would have resistance, and I would bring my mind back to the feelings and get started. And often I only get started like 15 minutes in, but I would stay longer than 2 hours and get this done maybe in 1 2 days instead of 5. And these are the little rules that really, really helped me. Yeah, I started to up leveling, like these were the new ones. Even if I just a minute, I would look for something important to do and we'll start working. I stopped entertaining thoughts about it will work or not. Like they were not important. Like if it needs to get done, then it needs to get done. Like if it doesn't work, I will find out by doing it. There's no all these thoughts were just limiting me and making me feel worse. And then I want to make conscientiousness one of my strengths and not tolerate it any longer as one of my weaknesses. And I think I succeeded in that, and I'm really proud of that. And I really trust myself committing to projects that I would have never thought I would ever do. So I don't know if I have a little bit over time. Maybe Mike, you can. That's fine. Great. Thanks. Oh, Steve, yeah, if you succeed, the resulting responsibility can be overwhelming. It can be, and it is sometimes, and it has been for me. But the thing is, like, suffering of life cannot be avoided. And so you kind of want to balance that with responsibility. You kind of want to balance that with that responsibility, and being able to learn how to carry that is so important. I think like the world is waiting for us to fulfill our potential. Like especially those who are really sensitive and feel these emotions very easily, and easily see what's wrong with things and want to improve them. Like we need to become more resilient, and we need to take this responsibility. There's no other way. So, but reminder, it should be joyful. The unconscious patterns of avoidance, we should replace them with conscious intentions. If I feel this and I intended to do this, I'm gonna feel it and do it anyway. And so by intentionally cultivating resilience in the face of difficulties, you not only feel the positive emotional that you deserve, you actually create a fundamentally different self-image. And that self-image is someone who the potential is open. Like there are opportunities everywhere because you know you can commit to them. And this trust breeds joy, which again reduces procrastination. And over time, these negative emotions will diminish more and more, and procrastination is no longer a problem. And so I really like this quote as well. Like if you accomplish something with hard work, the labor passes quickly, but the good endures. If something's shameful in pursuit of pleasure, the pleasure passes quickly. But you can bet yourself on this, it's the shame endures. And to all of this, I would say be a scientist, be an adventurer, like cultivate some curiosity. If you're feeling tempted to procrastinate, like take this moment to be a little bit brave, be a bit like, okay, like commit to change, and then, bring your attention to the sensations of your mind and body. What makes the distraction so tempting? Where are they? What do they remind you of? Like, I bet they're often deep buried into things in the past that we haven't resolved, whether that trauma or other forms of situations where we were judged very harshly and we felt like we couldn't do it and we're never going to do that again. Like bring a curiosity mindset to these things, because often when you start watching them and you start owning them and accepting them, they're just messengers, and we can disidentify with them and clean up our being and start to do the things that lead us closer to our potential. So I'm going to close off with this slide. This is all just part of the cleaning up, waking up, growing up, and showing up. These things, this is what the world needs. And if you're doing this retreat, you learning exactly the things you need to do all these things. And I'd say make a list, put them on um, paper, and write down the emotions next to it, and that you are avoiding, and then the emotions that you would feel if you would complete these next to it, and then start ticking them off. This is a Nietzsche quote that I like, and I think this is like almost like the high existence ethos. The most intelligent men and women, like the strongest, find their happiness where others would only disaster. In the labyrinth, in being hard with themselves and with others, in effort. Their delight is in self-mastery. In them, asceticism becomes second nature, a necessity, an instinct. And that's like knowing these are messages like, oh, thank you for teaching me where I need to go. They regard a difficult task as a privilege. It is to them a recreation to play with burdens that would crush all others. And we all know there are examples in life of people able to do this, so it's possible. This was me. I am the co-founder of HighExistence Synthesis, and I am an ex-chronic procrastinator. Are there any further questions in the chat? I'm happy to answer a few. I don't know how many. Maybe I have maybe 5 more minutes before the next person needs to go. Isn't it wake up first? Well, waking up can be very painful if you haven't cleaned up your life first. So it kind of depends. I see them as all very interrelated. It's hard to know exactly what to clean up when you haven't woken up first. Is to wake up first. I think they're all interrelated. We all need it. Thanks, guys. Should we aim to balance these periods of focused works while feeling anxiety with more regular actions, so we didn't always wait a long time before a cleanup session? I think periodic exposure is best. We don't want to do chronic. We don't want to do things that we know are too difficult or too much. So, start small and celebrate the successes. But be honest. Like, always try a little bit that's outside of your comfort zone. That's where you learn the most. Can you give the example again regarding your procrastination or your thesis? Sure. So I had to write my philosophy thesis, and I had a professor that was very strict in his ways, and I was writing about the phenomenology of animism and how feeling interrelated with the world actually would give rise to a sense of ethics, of caring for. Because if you realize you're your environment, then your selfish desire should come up and realize, oh, I'm not different. And to put that on paper, it was so meaningful to me, and I felt like it was so much at stake that I was just crippled with fear and crippled with anxiety. And I put it off month after month, and I just didn't know how to overcome it. Like, I would wake up in the morning and I was like, okay, now is the time I'm really gonna sit. And I would sit in front of my computer and like, okay, let me do this first and that first. And I would feel worse and worse until I was like, oh, maybe I can't work while I'm feeling this. Like, I just can't. I need to wait until my mood is better, my creativity starts working. and I'll try and do it tomorrow. And that happened for like, I don't know, a couple months in a row, which was pretty bad. And then I started reading. First thing I learned, okay, what I was doing was procrastination, because I didn't even know that. And then I started learning about it and fixing it. What if you know something bad will happen if you do this thing? Getting reprimanded, hurting someone yourself, monetary loss. That is, you know there's a barrier causing you to a substantial more than just negative feelings. Well, this is a deeper question. Like, what is skillful action? What is right action? Sometimes we need to do things that are right or good for us, even though it hurts other people, even though other people disagree. And that gives rise to a lot of feelings of anxiety and fear. But if we know on some deep level that it needs to be done, it needs to be done, even though there are consequences that are difficult to face. Yeah. Good luck with that. One important task was basically creating new projects. Like, I was procrastinating on Apotheosis for like, I don't know, like a couple months before I really figured it out, like what was going on in that sense, in that situation, and committed to doing it. Thanks, John. I appreciate it. The pain of regret is greater than the suffering of discipline. 100%. Hey, Mike.
Hey. Thank you so
Time to
much,
go.
Martijn. Yeah, we have to shift gears but appreciate you sticking around to answer these questions. And for everyone, listening who got something out of this, we probably wouldn't be here today without Martijn's contributions to HighExistence over the years. And if you want to learn more about what he's up to right now, he's literally setting the standard for therapeutic psychedelic experiences with synthesis. So definitely check out synthesisretreat.com to learn more about that. And yeah, any parting words, Martijn?
Thanks, Mike. I love what you guys are doing, and it's amazing. You guys got over 200 people here, and I would ask everyone, don't procrastinate on donating. Like, these are amazing guys. We all got hit hard by the virus, and yeah, they could really use it. They're a small team and not making much money, and they're doing amazing work. So if you have anything, just consider donating a little bit.